At exactly 6:03 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, Kairo Winters made a promise to her billionaire husband that would test everything she believed about love, trust, and the vows they'd spoken 3 years earlier. She had no idea that by noon, 38 messages would land on her phone like grenades, each one designed to detonate the carefully constructed life they'd built together. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. To that moment when the morning light filtered through their penthouse windows, and Kairo's body instinctively knew something had shifted in her world. She woke at 5:47 a.m. to an empty bed still warm from her husband's body. The shower was running in their master bathroom, the familiar sound that usually signaled just another demanding day for Declan ASHFORD, the man who'd tripled his family's investment empire in just 5 years. But this morning felt different. This morning felt like the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. Kairo was a woman who commanded attention without demanding it. A 32-year-old pharmaceutical research consultant whose deep brown skin glowed with a natural radiance, whose natural curls framed a face that balanced strength and softness in equal measure. She'd built her career helping major healthcare companies develop community-focused wellness programs, always staying connected to the tight-knit neighborhood that raised her. You know the kind of community I'm talking about, where Sunday dinners meant the whole block gathering at her grandmother's house, where the smell of cornbread and collard greens could make you cry with nostalgia, where stepping out looking anything less than your best was simply unthinkable, and where success was celebrated but never allowed to separate you from your roots. Her husband came from an entirely different universe. Declan ASHFORD. That name alone opened doors at country clubs where memberships cost more than luxury cars. Old money, boarding schools, sailing lessons in Martha's Vineyard. The kind of privilege that came with unspoken expectations and a legacy to uphold. They'd met 3 years ago at a medical research conference, her presenting on health disparities, him representing his family's philanthropic foundation. Where others had asked superficial questions and moved on, Declan had stayed, genuinely interested in understanding the systemic issues she'd outlined. Their connection had been immediate and undeniable, a beautiful contradiction of passion and thoughtfulness, spontaneity and deliberation. The wedding had been a careful blend of both their worlds, her cousin's soul-stirring rendition of Here and Now, meeting his family's string quartet playing Bach, her aunties teaching his very proper grandmother the electric slide, while his college friends learned the sacred art of the Cupid shuffle. Kairo's grandmother had pulled Declan aside that day and told him, "You're family now, baby. That means we'll love you hard, but we'll also tell you the truth. You take care of my grandbaby's heart, you hear?" He had promised he would. But lately, something had shifted like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of their marriage. Declan had become consumed by a new acquisition, a biotech startup promising to revolutionize cancer treatment. Long hours at the office, exhaustion etched into his face, distance growing between them like frost spreading across glass. The man who used to leave her little notes on the bathroom mirror had stopped. The man who used to pull her into slow dances in their kitchen while dinner cooked had become a stranger who barely looked up from his laptop during meals. And now, at 5:47 a.m., Kairo was about to discover just how many secrets a marriage could hold. The bathroom door opened, releasing a cloud of steam. Declan emerged already dressed in his tailored Tom Ford suit, his sandy blonde hair still damp and combed back. His blue eyes, usually warm when they landed on her, were troubled, distant, carrying the weight of something unspeakable. "You're up early?" Kairo said softly, sitting up and pulling the sheet around her shoulders as morning chill raised goosebumps on her arms. "Couldn't sleep," he replied, not quite meeting her gaze as he fastened his watch. The vintage Patek Philippe his grandfather had given him on his 21st birthday. Big day ahead. She tried to keep her voice casual. The Meridian deal? Among other things. He moved to his nightstand, picked up his phone, and stared at the screen for a long moment. His jaw tightened in that way it did when he was trying to control his emotions, trying to hold back a flood with sheer willpower alone. Then he said the 4 words that sent ice through her veins. "Kairo, we need to talk." She'd heard those words before in different contexts, but never from him. Never in this tone, heavy with dread and resignation, like a man about to confess something that would change everything. Her mind immediately started racing through possibilities. Had something happened with the business? His family? Their families had learned to coexist peacefully, but she knew his mother still harbored reservations about their union, though she was too polite to voice them directly. Kairo had heard the whispered comments at family gatherings, seen the way some of Declan's relatives looked at her like she was an exotic curiosity rather than family. Declan sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her, shoulders tense like a man carrying invisible weight. I need you to trust me today. Whatever you hear, whatever anyone tells you, whatever you see. I need you to remember that I love you, and that I would never intentionally hurt you. Kairo's heart began to race, her pulse thundering in her ears. Declan, you're scaring me. What's going on? He turned to face her then, and she saw something in his expression she'd never seen before, fear. Real, genuine, bone-deep fear that made his eyes look glassy with unshed tears. There are going to be some stories today. About me. About the company. I can't control the narrative once it breaks, but I need you to know that things are not what they're going to seem. What kind of stories warrant a warning at dawn? What kind of secrets require a preemptive plea for trust? What kind of stories? Kairo asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but Declan couldn't give her answers. Not yet. Not in the way she needed. I can't explain everything right now. I'm still trying to manage the situation. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, though confusion and the first tendrils of worry were beginning to wrap around her heart like vines, tightening with each passing second. Just promise me you won't make any decisions based on what you hear today. Promise me you'll wait until we can sit down tonight and I can explain everything. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. What kind of husband asks his wife to trust him blindly? What kind of marriage requires that level of faith without foundation? Declan, she started, but he cut her off with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Promise me, Kairo. His grip on her hand tightened, almost painful now, and she could feel his pulse racing through his fingertips like a hummingbird's wings. I promise, she whispered, though she had no idea what she was promising. No idea that those two words would be tested in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The promise felt hollow even as she spoke it, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt more like goodbye than good morning, more like an ending than a beginning, and left for the office. It was 6:03 a.m. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that made Kairo's stomach clench. She tried to go about her morning routine, clinging to normalcy like a life raft in churning seas. She did her skincare ritual, the one her mother had taught her using shea butter and natural oils that smelled like home and heritage. She said her affirmations in the mirror the way her grandmother had taught her, the same words she'd spoken every morning for years. I am worthy. I am strong. I am loved. But today the words felt empty, failing to settle into her spirit the way they usually did, bouncing off her chest like stones skipping across water. She put on her favorite cashmere loungewear and tried to focus on the day ahead. A rare day off, planning to catch up on reading and maybe meet her best friend Tasha for lunch. But Declan's cryptic warning kept echoing in her mind, growing louder with each passing minute, like a siren in the distance getting closer and closer until you can't ignore it anymore. At 7:32 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. Girl, you need to call me right now. I'm serious. Before Kairo could even process those words, another message came through, this time from her cousin Brianna. Have you seen the news? Please tell me this isn't true. Call me when you can. Then her mother, the woman who'd taught her how to hold her head high no matter what storms came. Baby, your father and I are here if you need us. Whatever you're going through, we love you. Come home if you need to. 3 messages in less than 2 minutes, each one laced with concern that made Kairo's hands begin to tremble. What had happened in the hour and 29 minutes since Declan left their penthouse? What could have possibly broken that would have her entire support system reaching out before 8 a.m.? With fingers that felt numb and disconnected from her body, Kairo opened her news app. The headline hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs and making the room spin around her. ASHFORD Industries CEO under investigation. alleged ties to offshore accounts and financial misconduct. She scrolled frantically through the article, her vision blurring as she tried to process words that seemed impossible, surreal, like reading about someone else's life in someone else's nightmare. Terms jumped out at her: money laundering, SEC investigation, mysterious transactions totaling $47 million, unnamed associates, possible criminal charges. Each phrase was a hammer blow, each accusation a crack in the foundation of everything she thought she knew. But it was the next headline, from a tabloid site known for destroying lives with a smile and a byline, that made her stomach drop and her coffee threaten to come back up. Billionaire Declan Ashford's secret life. Luxury apartments and unexplained expenditures raise questions about marital fidelity. The article was full of innuendo and unnamed sources, the kind of gossip journalism that trades in half-truths and strategic omissions. It mentioned a luxury apartment in Tribeca, regular visits at odd hours, significant withdrawals of cash that didn't match any business records, encrypted communications on a secondary phone. The implication was clear even if the article stopped short of making direct accusations, painting a picture in shadows and suggestions. They were suggesting her husband was living a double life, that Kairo was either complicit or pitifully ignorant, the faithful wife too blind to see what everyone else could apparently see with perfect clarity. Her phone began ringing incessantly. Friends, family members, colleagues, even people she hadn't spoken to in years suddenly concerned about her well-being, suddenly needing to know if she was okay, if she'd known, if the rumors were true. She let them all go to voicemail because how could she talk to anyone when she couldn't talk to herself? How could she explain what she herself didn't understand? How could she defend him when she didn't know what she was defending him against? The questions spiraled in her mind, each one breeding three more, multiplying like cells dividing, until her thoughts were a chaotic mess of doubt and confusion and fear. At 8:47 a.m., a text came from her cousin Brianna again. "The ladies from church are asking about you. Grammy is worried sick. Please just let us know you're okay." Grammy, her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her to believe in the sanctity of marriage, in standing by your partner through storms, in trust as the foundation of love. What would Grammy say about all this? What wisdom could possibly apply to a situation like this? At 9:03 a.m., another text arrived, this time from an unknown number. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm a reporter with the Tribune. I'd love to get your side of the story. Will you comment on your husband's alleged activities?" She blocked the number immediately, fingers moving on instinct, but three more messages from different reporters came within minutes, like sharks smelling blood in the water. They were vultures, every single one of them, circling what they perceived as a scandal, not caring about the real people whose lives they were dissecting for entertainment and clicks and ad revenue. They didn't care that behind these headlines was a woman sitting alone in her penthouse, watching her world crack apart like ice on a frozen lake, wondering if the next step would be the one that plunged her into freezing water. And then, at 9:15 a.m., came the message that would change everything. Another unknown number, but this one felt different, more sinister, more intentional. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. He's not who you think he is. The apartment on Franklin Street. Unit 4C. If you want the truth, the doorman knows to let you up. You deserve to know what kind of man you married." Kairo stared at the message until the screen blurred with tears she refused to let fall, tears that burned behind her eyes but wouldn't grant her the release of actually crying. Everything in her wanted to delete it, to believe in Declan, to honor the promise she'd made just 3 hours and 12 minutes ago. Her grandmother had always taught her that trust was the foundation of love, that you stand by your partner through the storms, that marriage meant being a team even when the game got rough. But doubt was a poison, and it was already spreading through her veins like ink in water, making her question everything she thought she knew. She thought about their wedding vows, about the promises they'd made before God and their families, before everyone they loved gathered in that beautiful space where two worlds had merged for one perfect day. She thought about the first time Declan had told her he loved her, during a rainstorm when they were stuck in traffic, how genuine and vulnerable he'd seemed, how his voice had cracked with emotion. She thought about the nights they'd stayed up talking about their dreams, about the family they'd build, about how they'd raised their children to appreciate both sides of their heritage, to move fluidly between both worlds without losing themselves in either one. By 9:45 a.m., she had showered and dressed, still unsure what she was going to do, her body moving through motions while her mind remained paralyzed with indecision. Her phone continued to buzz with messages. A group chat with her cousins had exploded with speculation and support, messages flying so fast she couldn't keep up. Tasha had sent 17 messages ranging from concern to outrage, each one more insistent than the last. Her mother had called 4 times, and with each missed call, Kairo could feel the weight of her family's worry pressing down on her shoulders. At 10 a.m., she found herself in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone pale, staring at the address she'd typed into her GPS almost without conscious decision. Franklin Street, Tribeca. She told herself she just needed to see the building, to prove to herself that this was all some elaborate misunderstanding or malicious rumor. Declan had enemies, successful people always did. The higher you climbed, the more people wanted to see you fall. Maybe this was corporate sabotage. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything, and by tonight when they sat down together, they'd laugh about how close she'd come to believing the lies. But as she drove through the city streets, past boutiques and cafes where they'd spent lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper and stealing bites of each other's pastries, she couldn't silence the voice in her head asking the question that kept getting louder. What if it's true? What if the man she'd built her life around, the man she'd chosen above all others, the man who'd promised to honor and cherish her, had been lying to her all along? What if she was the fool everyone would pity, the woman too in love to see what was right in front of her face? The building on Franklin Street was exactly as luxurious as she'd feared. All glass and steel, with a doorman in a pristine uniform standing beneath a modern awning. The kind of building that screamed money and discretion in equal measure. Kairo sat in her car across the street for 15 minutes, watching people come and go. Young professionals in expensive workout gear. Wealthy retirees walking designer dogs. The kind of people who paid $15,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment just to have a Tribeca address, just to be able to say they lived in the right neighborhood. At 10:28 a.m., she finally gathered the courage to cross the street, her legs feeling like they belonged to someone else, like she was watching herself from a distance. The doorman looked up as she approached, and something in his expression told her he knew exactly who she was. He'd been expecting her. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, not as a question but as a statement of fact, confirmation that she was exactly where someone had planned for her to be. "Unit 4C, Mr. Ashford called. Said you might come by. Elevator is to your right." The fact that Declan had called ahead should have comforted her. It suggested transparency, nothing to hide, a husband who had nothing to fear from his wife's investigation. Instead, it made everything worse, made her stomach twist with a new kind of dread. He'd known she would come. He'd anticipated her breaking her promise. He'd warned the doorman. What was waiting for her in Unit 4C? What truth required this level of preparation? The elevator ride felt endless, each floor ticking by with agonizing slowness. Her reflection in the polished brass doors showed a woman she barely recognized. Eyes wide with fear and uncertainty, jaw clenched with determination, caught between the person she'd been at 6:03 a.m. and whoever she was becoming with each revelation. This wasn't the confident woman who'd presented to boardrooms full of executives, who'd built a career on her expertise and charisma. This was a wife about to discover whether her marriage was built on love or lies, whether the foundation she'd been standing on was solid ground or quicksand. The hallway on the 4th floor was quiet, carpeted in plush gray that muffled her footsteps, making her approach feel secretive, illicit. Unit 4C was at the end, its door identical to all the others except for the brass numbers that seemed to mock her with their ordinariness. Just another door. Just another apartment. Just another secret that could destroy everything. She knocked, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest, might announce itself to everyone on the floor. No answer. The silence stretched, oppressive and thick. She tried the handle, half expecting it to be locked, half hoping it would be so she could turn around and leave without knowing. Turned smoothly, unlocked. An invitation or a trap. She couldn't tell which. The apartment was beautiful, minimalist and modern, with huge windows overlooking the street below, expensive furniture that looked barely used, art on the walls that probably cost more than most people's cars. But it was what filled the space that made Kairo's breath catch in her throat, made time seem to stop as her brain tried to process what she was seeing. Medical equipment, hospital-grade monitors with their screens dark and waiting, an adjustable bed that looked like it belonged in a private clinic. Oxygen tanks lined up against one wall like silent sentries. For stands, medication dispensers, and on every available surface, the mantel, the bookshelf, the side tables, photographs. Photographs of a young woman with Declan's same blue eyes and blonde hair, but thinner, frilier, her smile brave despite the obvious illness ravaging her body, despite the shadows under her eyes and the way her cheekbones protruded too sharply. On the kitchen counter, Kairo found a folder the kind doctors use for patient files. Inside were medical bills with numbers that made her head spin, insurance claims marked denied in red stamps, treatment plans written in medical terminology she only partially understood. And a letter, in Declan's familiar handwriting, dated 6 months ago. 6 months of secrets, 6 months of lies by omission. Dr. Rothstein, as discussed, all bills for Cecily's care should be sent directly to me at the private address. My wife cannot know about this situation. The stress and complexity would be too much to burden her with, especially given how much she's dealing with at work. My sister made me promise to keep her illness private. She doesn't want pity or attention. I'm honoring that wish, even though it means keeping secrets from the person I love most. Please continue the experimental treatment protocol. Cost is irrelevant. D.A. Kairo's hands shook as she read it again. Then a third time, each word rearranging her understanding of reality. Not an affair. Not money laundering for personal gain. Not the betrayal she'd been bracing herself for. A sister. A dying sister Declan had never mentioned in 3 years of marriage. A sister whose existence had been completely erased from every conversation they'd ever had about family. Experimental cancer treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions. The offshore accounts suddenly made sense. Not hiding stolen money but protecting assets to pay for treatments. The secret apartment wasn't a love nest but a medical facility. The encrypted messages weren't coordinating affairs but discussing treatment protocols. Every piece of damning evidence had an explanation that was somehow both better and worse than what she'd imagined. Better because he wasn't cheating. Worse because he'd been carrying this alone. Had chosen to exclude her from something this monumental. Had decided she couldn't be trusted with his sister's existence. At 10:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Declan. "You're at the apartment. The doorman told me. I'm so sorry you found out this way. Cecily didn't want anyone to know. The experimental treatment was working until last month. She made me promise not to tell you because she didn't want to be pitted or to overshadow our happiness. I've been protecting her secret, but I never wanted to lie to you. Can we talk?" Kairo stared at the message, relief and anger warring in her chest. Relief that her husband wasn't the man the headlines suggested. Anger that he'd kept something this significant from her. But before she could formulate a response, before she could process what she'd learned, more texts started flooding in. And these weren't from Declan. These were from numbers she didn't recognize. Messages that arrived with the precision of a coordinated attack. 10:51 a.m. Unknown number. Your husband's sister is not the full story. Ask him about the woman he meets every Thursday at the Peninsula Hotel. Ask him about Vivian. The name hit her like a slap. Vivian. Who was Vivian? 10:53 a.m. Unknown number. There are receipts. Jewelry purchases. Hotel rooms. Your husband is a liar, and his sick sister is a convenient cover story. Wake up before it's too late. 10:55 a.m. Unknown number. Vivian Laurent. Google her. Then ask yourself why your husband has spent $340,000 on her in the past year. Then ask yourself if you're really the only woman in his life. 10:58 a.m. Unknown number. Room 1604. Peninsula Hotel. Thursday afternoons. Every week for 8 months. Still think he's faithful? Still think you know your husband? Kairo's world tilted. The brief moment of clarity dissolving into new confusion, new doubt. Her fingers moved almost without her permission. typing Vivian Laurent into her phone's browser. The results loaded and her stomach turned. A stunning French woman, mid-30s, with dark hair and sophisticated features, described as a private medical consultant specializing in experimental oncology treatments. More searches revealed articles about cutting-edge cancer research, clinical trials in Europe, Vivian's role in connecting wealthy clients with experimental treatments not yet approved in the United States. It all made sense. It fit with everything she'd just learned about Cecily. But there were other photos too, photos that made her breath catch. Vivian and Declan at a medical conference, standing close, her hand on his arm. Vivian and Declan having dinner at an upscale restaurant, wine glasses raised, smiling at each other across candlelight. The photos were professional, not romantic, but the tabloid captions implied otherwise. Billionaire's mystery woman, secret relationship uncovered, ASHFORD's double life exposed. How do you know what to believe when every explanation comes with a new accusation? How do you separate truth from manipulation when the evidence points in every direction at once? At 11:12 a.m., her phone rang. Declan. She answered, her voice sounding strange to her own ears, distant and cold. Kairo, please let me explain. He started, but she cut him off with a question that felt like swallowing glass. Who is Vivian Laurent? The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4, but it felt like an eternity. She's Cecily's doctor. Well, not officially. She connects patients with experimental treatments in Europe. That's where the money went. Flying Cecily to Geneva for treatments, paying for Vivian's consultation fees, covering experimental drugs that cost $50,000 per round. Kairo, I swear to you. The hotel rooms. Her voice was ice. Cecily was too weak to travel sometimes. Vivian would come here to the apartment, but sometimes we'd meet at the hotel to review treatment options away from Cecily, so she wouldn't hear us discussing the worst-case scenarios. I didn't want my sister to hear us talking about her dying, about survival rates and backup plans and what to do when the treatment stops working. It made sense. God help her, it all made sense. Every explanation fit perfectly with the evidence, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. But the doubt had already taken root, planted by those anonymous messages, watered by months of secrecy, growing like weeds in the garden of her trust. How do I know you're telling the truth? Kairo whispered, the question tearing out of her throat. How do I know this isn't just an elaborate story, a convenient explanation you prepared in case I found out? How do I know anything anymore? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Declan finally spoke, his voice was broken in a way she'd never heard before, cracked and raw with emotion. You don't. You can't. You have to choose to trust me or choose not to. But I swear on everything I hold sacred, Kairo, on our vows, on my sister's life, on the love we built together. I have never been unfaithful to you. I've only been trying to save my sister's life while honoring her wish for privacy. That's the truth. That's all of it. But was it? 11:18 a.m., unknown number. He's lying to protect himself. Meet me at Café Noir at noon. I'll show you proof of what your husband is really doing. Proof he can't explain away. Someone who actually cares about the truth. 11:21 a.m., unknown number. The SEC investigation is real. Your husband is using his sister's illness to hide financial crimes. The medical bills are fabricated. Wake up before you become complicit in his fraud. 11:24 a.m. Tasha. Girl, I'm seeing all these headlines. TMZ just posted something about a French woman. Are you okay? I'm coming over right now. Don't make any decisions until I get there. 11:27 a.m. Her mother. Baby, your daddy wants you to know that whatever you decide, we support you. But remember what Grammy always said, the enemy's best weapon is division. Don't let outside voices tell you what's happening in your own marriage. Come home and we'll figure this out together. 11:30 a.m. Unknown number. Last chance. Café Noir. Noon. Bring the folder you found. I'll show you what those medical bills really mean. Or stay blind to who your husband really is. Your choice. 38 messages total since that morning. 38 different voices. 38 different versions of truth. All of them demanding she choose. All of them pulling her in different directions like a body being drawn and quartered. Kairo stood in that apartment, surrounded by evidence of both love and possible betrayal, with her phone full of messages that could either save her marriage or destroy it. And she realized something profound. She had no idea who to trust. Not the anonymous messengers who claimed to have her best interests at heart. Not the media painting lurid pictures for clicks and views. Not even her own husband, who'd proven he could keep massive secrets while looking her in the eyes and saying, "I love you," every single night. The question wasn't whether Declan was telling the truth. It was whether she was brave enough to find out, whether their marriage was worth fighting for, whether love could survive this level of deception even if the deception had noble intentions. At 11:45 a.m., with 15 minutes until the deadline set by her anonymous contact, Kairo had to make a choice that would define the rest of her life. But what happens when every choice feels like a betrayal of her husband, of herself, of the truth, of the promises made at 6:03 a.m.? What do you do when you're standing at a crossroads and every path leads into darkness? So what did Kairo do? Did she drive to Café Noir to meet the mysterious contact promising proof that would shatter whatever remained of her trust? Did she return to the penthouse to hide from the world, to let the storm pass over her while she waited for answers that might never come? The answer, the choice that would define not just her marriage but the woman she would become, surprised everyone, including herself. At 11:52 a.m., Kairo walked out of that apartment, got in her car, and drove. But not to Café Noir. Not back to the penthouse. She drove straight to Declan's office, cutting through midday traffic with a clarity of purpose that felt almost transcendent, like she'd finally stopped reacting and started acting. Because here's what Kairo understood in that moment, standing in an apartment filled with medical equipment and photographs of a sister-in-law she'd never known existed. Anonymous voices don't get to write your story. Fear doesn't get to make your decisions. And if her marriage was going to end, if trust was truly broken beyond repair, it wouldn't be because strangers on the internet told her what to believe. It would be because she looked her husband in the eyes and heard the truth, whatever that truth turned out to be, directly from the only person who could actually give it to her. She arrived at the ASHFORD Industries building at exactly noon, walking past the receptionist who knew her by sight, past the security guard who nodded respectfully, taking the private elevator reserved for executives and their families up to the top floor. The elevator music was playing some instrumental version of a song she couldn't quite place, and she watched the numbers climb. 23, 24, 25. Each floor bringing her closer to a confrontation she both desperately needed and absolutely dreaded. Through the glass walls of the executive conference room, she could see the emergency board meeting in full swing. Serious men in expensive suits, stern women with power haircuts and designer glasses, all of them discussing the morning's headlines, the SEC investigation, the damage control that needed to happen immediately. And at the head of the table sat Declan, his shoulders squared, his expression carefully controlled, the very picture of a CEO managing a crisis. But Kairo knew him well enough to see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers gripped his pen just a little too tightly, the slight crease between his eyebrows that appeared when he was trying not to break under pressure. He saw her through the glass. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, the entire meeting seemed to freeze. He said something to the board members, stood, excused himself with the kind of authority that brooked no argument, and met her in the hallway. They faced each other in that sterile corporate corridor, the weight of 38 messages and 6 hours of revelations hanging between them like fog, obscuring the people they'd been just that morning when he'd kissed her forehead and asked her to trust him. "I need the whole truth," Kairo said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "Not the version you think will hurt me least. Not the story that makes you look best. Not the explanation that protects your sister's privacy or your company's reputation. The whole, complete truth. Because right now I have 38 messages on my phone, and half of them are telling me you're a liar, and the other half are telling me to trust you. And I don't know which ones to believe anymore, Declan. I don't know anything anymore." Declan looked at her with eyes that had seen too much that day, that had carried too many secrets for too long, that were tired of the wait. "Okay," he said simply, "the whole truth. But not here." Come with me. He led her to a private conference room, the kind reserved for confidential meetings and sensitive negotiations, closed the blinds so no one could see in, and then he did something that caught her completely off guard. He sat down across from her, not beside her, creating physical distance that felt intentional, giving her space to process without the influence of proximity or touch. And for the next 2 hours, he told her everything. Not the sanitized version. Not the carefully crafted explanation designed to minimize damage. Everything. He told her about Cecily, his younger sister by 8 years, the baby of the family who'd always been too adventurous for her own good, too rebellious against the ASHFORD family expectations. He told her about the diagnosis 14 months ago, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the kind with survival rates measured in months not years, the kind that made doctors use phrases like "get your affairs in order" and "make the most of the time you have left." He told her how Cecily had made him promise, had grabbed his hand in that hospital room and made him swear on their father's grave that he wouldn't tell anyone, wouldn't let her become that ASHFORD girl with cancer, wouldn't let her entire identity be swallowed by pity and whispered conversations and people treating her like she was already dead. She didn't want to be defined by her illness, Declan said, his voice cracking. She didn't want the society pages running stories about brave battles and tragic endings. She didn't want our mother planning her funeral while she was still alive. She just wanted to fight this thing quietly with dignity on her own terms. He showed her medical records on his tablet, scrolling through pages of lab results and imaging reports and doctor's notes that painted a picture of a woman fighting for her life against impossible odds. He showed her text message chains with Vivian Laurent, and Kairo could see they were exactly what he'd claimed: clinical discussions about treatment protocols, debates about whether to try an experimental immunotherapy or stick with the conventional approach, conversations about balancing quality of life against aggressive treatment. There were messages about logistics too. Flight to Geneva booked for Tuesday. Dr. Rousseau can see Cecily on the 15th. New round of treatment will cost $63,000. Wiring funds now. Nothing romantic. Nothing inappropriate. Just two people trying desperately to save someone they both cared about. He showed her photographs on his phone, pictures he'd never shared with anyone. Declan sitting beside Cecily's hospital bed in Geneva, holding her hand while poison pumped through her veins, trying to kill the cancer faster than it killed her. Cecily looking frail but smiling, giving the camera a thumbs up despite the 4 in her arm. Vivian in the background of one photo, reviewing charts, all business and professional focus. The hotel meetings were real, Declan admitted. But they were exactly what I told you. Sometimes Cecily would have bad days. Days when the treatment made her so sick she couldn't even sit up, and Vivian would come to discuss whether we should reduce the dosage or push through. We'd meet at the peninsula because I couldn't have those conversations in front of my sister. I couldn't let her hear us talking about her like she might not make it, about backup plans and palliative care options and what to do when the experimental treatments stopped working. His voice broke completely then, tears finally spilling over, and Kairo saw the weight he'd been carrying alone for more than a year. Do you know what it's like to watch your little sister die and pretend to everyone that everything's fine? To smile at dinner parties while you're calculating whether you have enough money to try one more experimental treatment? To lie to your wife every single day because you promised someone you love that you'd protect their secret? Then he explained the SEC investigation, pulling up documents and emails that told a story of corporate sabotage and revenge. Marcus Hendricks, a former business partner who'd been pushed out of the Meridian acquisition deal after Declan discovered he was skimming money and manipulating data. Marcus had filed false reports with the SEC, suggesting that Declan's offshore accounts were being used for money laundering and fraud, knowing the investigation would trigger media coverage regardless of whether the allegations had merit. He knew about Cecily, Declan said, his jaw tight with anger. We went to prep school together. He knew I had a sister, and he weaponized that knowledge, leaked just enough information to make journalists curious, planted the seeds about secret apartments and unexplained expenditures. He didn't need the accusations to be true. He just needed them to be loud enough to damage me during the most critical phase of the Meridian deal. Kairo listened to all of this, watching her husband's face, looking for tells, for signs of deception. But all she saw was exhaustion and pain and the raw vulnerability of a man who'd been trying to be everything to everyone and had nearly destroyed himself in the process. Why didn't you tell me? she asked finally. The question that had been burning in her chest since the moment she found that letter. Why did you think you had to carry this alone? Declan looked down at his hands. Those same hands that had held hers on their wedding day, that had pulled her close during late-night conversations about their future, that had promised to honor and cherish her for better or worse. Because Cecily asked me not to. Because I thought I could protect you from the pain of watching someone die. Because... He hesitated, then looked up at her with heartbreaking honesty. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew how much time and energy and money I was pouring into saving my sister, you'd feel neglected. Afraid that the stress would damage what we had. Afraid that I couldn't be the husband you deserved while being the brother Cecily needed. So I tried to be both. And instead I became a liar who kept secrets from the person I love most in the world. The silence that followed felt different than all the silences that had come before it. This wasn't the heavy silence of secrets and evasion. This was the silence of processing, of a woman trying to reconcile her anger at being excluded with her understanding of why he'd made the choices he made. Were his intentions good enough to excuse the deception? Could a marriage survive this level of fundamental dishonesty, even if that dishonesty came from a place of love? Kairo thought about her grandmother, about the lessons learned around that kitchen table about trust and forgiveness and what it really means to stand by someone through sickness and health. She thought about the anonymous messages, about how easily she'd been manipulated, about how someone had known exactly which buttons to push to make her doubt everything. She thought about the promise she'd made at 6:03 a.m., about choosing to trust even when trust felt impossible. And she thought about Cecily, a woman she'd never met, who was fighting for her life while strangers on the internet used her illness as ammunition in their war against her brother. I want to meet her, Kairo said finally, her voice quiet but firm. Your sister. Today. Right now. Declan's eyes widened with something that looked like hope mixed with fear. She's at the apartment now. Resting. She had treatment yesterday, so she's weak, but she's having a relatively good day. But Kairo, if we do this, if you meet her, we also need to acknowledge that our marriage is in trouble. That I've broken your trust in a fundamental way, even if my reasons seem justified to me. We need help. Professional help. Kairo nodded slowly. Marriage counseling. Starting this week. Because you keeping something this massive from me, even for what you believed were good reasons, means we have serious work to do. It means we need to learn how to communicate about impossible things, how to make decisions together even when those decisions are painful. But no. She took a breath, feeling the decision settle into her bones. They didn't succeed. Whoever sent those messages, whoever tried to use your sister's illness to destroy us, they didn't succeed. We're not divided. We're just learning how to be more honest. Learning how to trust each other with the hard things, not just the easy ones. The relief on Declan's face was profound and immediate, tears streaming freely now, no longer trying to maintain the controlled facade of a billionaire CEO. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for not giving up on us. On me. They drove to Tribeca together, and this time when Kairo walked into Unit 4C, it felt completely different. The medical equipment was no longer evidence of betrayal but proof of love. Proof of a brother who would spend millions and risk everything to give his sister a fighting chance. When they entered the apartment, a frail woman was sitting by the window in a wheelchair, wrapped in blankets despite the warm afternoon, reading a book. She looked up, and despite the illness that had ravaged her body, despite the shadows under her eyes and the way her hands trembled slightly, Kairo could see the family resemblance. The same determined jaw Declan had, the same kind eyes that saw more than they said, the same strength that refused to be diminished even by cancer. You must be Kairo, Cecily said, her voice weak but genuinely warm. I'm sorry for all the trouble my secrecy caused. Declan talked about you during every visit. He loves you so much it's almost embarrassing to watch. She smiled, and even illness couldn't diminish the mischief in that smile. I should have let him tell you the truth from the beginning. I was being selfish, trying to control one thing in a situation where I had no control over anything else. Kairo crossed the room and sat beside her, taking Cecily's thin hand in her own, feeling the fragility of bones too close to the surface, the coolness of skin that wasn't getting enough circulation. You wanted your privacy. You wanted to fight on your own terms. I understand that, but from now on, we face things together. All of us. No more secrets. No more fighting alone. Cecily squeezed her hand with surprising strength. You're good for him. I knew you would be, but it's nice to have confirmation. Welcome to the family, sister. Officially this time. Over the next few weeks, the truth emerged publicly, piece by careful piece. The SEC investigation was revealed to be baseless, filed by Marcus Hendricks in retaliation for being removed from the Meridian deal. Federal investigators cleared Declan of all allegations after reviewing his financial records and finding exactly what he'd claimed: legitimate medical expenses, experimental treatment costs, payments to licensed medical professionals in Europe. Marcus Hendricks faced charges himself for filing false reports and corporate espionage. The media eventually uncovered the real story about Cecily, and while some outlets issued quiet apologies for their speculation about affairs and double lives, others doubled down on salacious theories, because the truth is never quite as interesting as scandal. But Kairo and Declan had learned to tune out the noise, to focus on what mattered, to protect their family from voices that didn't deserve a say in their lives. They started marriage counseling that Thursday, sitting in a therapist's office in Manhattan, learning how to communicate about difficult things, about how good intentions weren't enough without transparency and trust. The counselor taught them about the difference between privacy and secrecy, about how to honor individual needs while maintaining partnership, about how to rebuild trust that had been damaged even by well-intentioned deception. It was hard work, harder than either of them had anticipated. There were sessions where they cried, sessions where they fought, sessions where old resentments and fears surfaced like debris after a storm. But they kept showing up, kept doing the work, kept choosing each other even when choosing each other was difficult. Kairo spent time with Cecily, getting to know the sister-in-law she'd been denied knowing, hearing stories about Declan as a boy that made her laugh until her sides hurt. Cecily told her about the time 12-year-old Declan had tried to run away from boarding school and made it all the way to the train station before calling their mother collect because he'd forgotten to pack money. She shared family recipes that had been passed down through generations of ASHFORDs, traditions that Kairo had never been part of because Cecily's illness had kept her separated from family gatherings. Tasha and Kairo's mother rallied around her, providing support that didn't demand explanations or judge choices. Her grandmother called one evening, her voice full of the wisdom that only comes from living long enough to see patterns repeat across generations. Every marriage goes through fire, baby, Grammy said. Every single one. The question isn't whether you'll face the flames. It's whether you'll walk through them together or let them drive you apart. Sounds to me like you chose to walk through together. That's how you build something that lasts. The 38 messages that had threatened to destroy their marriage became instead a strange kind of catalyst, a wake-up call that forced them to confront issues they'd been ignoring, to build the kind of communication that should have existed from the beginning. They learned that external voices, even those claiming to offer truth, even those wrapped in concern, couldn't define their relationship. Only they could do that through daily choices and difficult conversations and the willingness to be vulnerable even when vulnerability felt terrifying. Cecily lived for 8 more months, 8 months that became a gift they treasured. Long enough to see Kairo and Declan renew their vows on their 3rd anniversary, this time with no secrets between them, with Cecily in the front row crying happy tears. Long enough to plan elaborate pranks on Declan that made Kairo love her sister-in-law even more. Long enough to share family stories and memories, to teach Kairo the ASHFORD family traditions, to become not just Declan's sister but Kairo's sister too. Long enough to matter, to leave an imprint, to become woven into the fabric of their marriage in ways that would last long after she was gone. When she passed peacefully one spring morning, both Declan and Kairo were there, holding her hands as her breathing slowed and then stopped. And in her final moments, with the morning light streaming through those same windows where Kairo had first discovered the truth, Cecily whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on him, on us. You saved more than just a marriage. You saved a family." Years later, when people asked Kairo about that day, about the headlines that had screamed betrayal, about the messages that had tried to write her story for her, about the moment her marriage hung in the balance between trust and doubt, she would pause, gathering her thoughts the way her grandmother had taught her. And then she'd say this, "I learned that trust isn't about never doubting. It's about choosing to seek truth together rather than letting fear and outside voices make your choices for you." Those 38 messages tried to tell me who my husband was, what my marriage meant, how I should feel and what I should do. But they didn't know us. They didn't know our history or our love or our commitment to working through the hard things. They wanted to write our story for us, to make us characters in their narrative of scandal and betrayal. But we wrote it ourselves instead. We chose our own ending. The moral embedded in their story crystallized into something Kairo carried with her forever. In a world full of noise, where everyone has an opinion about your life and relationships, where scandals spread faster than truth and accusations are amplified while retractions are whispered, the most radical thing you can do is trust the people you've chosen to love. Not blindly. Trust should be earned and maintained through honesty, through showing up, through choosing transparency even when it's painful. But deliberately, intentionally, choose to communicate rather than assume. Choose to investigate together rather than alone. Choose to assume the best while verifying the facts. Choose your partner's voice over the crowd's chorus. Don't let the court of public opinion or anonymous accusers dictate the fate of your most important relationships, because those voices don't have to live with the consequences of the decisions they're pressuring you to make. And perhaps most importantly, the lesson that cost them so much to learn. Secrets, even those kept with the best intentions, even those meant to protect the people we love, can become weapons in the wrong hands. The truth, shared with love and vulnerability and the courage to face difficult emotions together, is always stronger than the most beautiful lie. Always. Kairo and Declan's marriage didn't just survive that Tuesday in June when 38 messages tried to tear them apart. It evolved into something deeper, something forged in fire and built on the kind of radical transparency that only comes from walking through hell together and choosing, every single day, to keep choosing each other. They learned to fight for their marriage instead of fighting with each other. They learned that love isn't about perfection but about persistence, about showing up even when showing up is hard, about believing the best about each other even when evidence might suggest otherwise. So now I want to ask you something, because Kairo and Declan's story isn't just their story. It's a mirror being held up to every relationship that's ever faced the siege of outside voices and internal doubts. When the messages start flooding in, when the accusations pile up, when everyone seems to have an opinion about what you should do with your own life, whose voice do you trust? Do you trust the anonymous sources claiming to have your best interests at heart? Or do you trust the person who's shown up for you day after day, even imperfectly? Do you let fear make your decisions? Or do you choose courage even when courage means risking heartbreak? And here's the bigger question, the one that really matters. What secrets are you keeping right now, thinking you're protecting someone you love, not realizing you're building a weapon that someone else might one day use against you? What conversations are you avoiding because they're too hard, too painful, too complicated, not knowing that avoiding them might cost you everything? Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever had to choose between trusting someone you love and believing voices that claim to be protecting you? What did you choose and what happened? And if you're keeping secrets right now, even good ones, even ones with noble intentions, what would happen if you chose radical honesty instead? Let's talk about it. Your story matters. Your experience could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if the story resonated with you, if it made you think differently about trust and truth and the power of choosing love even when love feels risky, do me a favor. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button because we tell real stories about real struggles here. Stories that don't shy away from complexity or pretend that love is easy. And most importantly, go have that hard conversation you've been avoiding. Choose transparency over comfortable lies. Choose your people over outside voices. Choose to write your own story instead of letting others write it for you. Because in the end, that's the only choice that really matters.